The camera slowly pans across an overly silent environment. An organized living room, an immaculate desk, an open notebook with a blank page. Nothing out of place. And the soundtrack is deep, almost menacing, as if a predator were about to emerge. The narrator enters with that respectable, deep, excessively serious voice, typical of scientific documentaries. Among all the creatures studied by modern science, there is one that has developed an extremely sophisticated defense mechanism. It avoids risks, failures, and embarrassment with mastery. The problem is that, along with this, it avoids life itself. Dramatic pause. Its scientific name, Homo perfectionis paralysatus. Homo perfectionis paralysatus is easy to recognize. He has brilliant ideas in his head, incredible projects in his imagination, important decisions postponed indefinitely. He's not irresponsible. On the contrary, he overthinks, overanalyzes, overplans, and acts too little. Fascinating. Behavior that has intrigued researchers for decades. Watch closely. Faced with a simple decision, this creature goes into a state of maximum alert. Mental pupils dilate. The brain begins to simulate catastrophic scenarios with a creativity worthy of an award-winning screenwriter. What if it goes wrong? What if I look ridiculous? What if they find out? I don't know everything. All this in less than 3 seconds. The narrator approaches suspense. Here we see the fear of making mistakes in its natural habitat. It doesn't appear as panic. It appears as prudence, common sense, responsibility. After all, making mistakes is dangerous, at least in the imagination. In real life, making mistakes rarely kills, but Homo perfectionis paralysatus acts as if each attempt were a social Russian roulette. This behavior doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's cultivated. Environments where making mistakes leads to punishment, constant comparisons, relentless evaluations. The brain learns early on that failure isn't just an event, it's a threat to identity. And so it creates a brilliant plan not to try. The camera follows the individual as he watches other people progress, people making mistakes, adjusting, learning. He watches and thinks, one day I'll get there. What he doesn't realize is that the path to get there leads precisely through the place he avoids. The mistake, the narrator comments with scientific irony. Curiously, the fewer mistakes an individual makes, the more frightening the mistake becomes, a phenomenon known as fear inflation. Because he has never tested the limits, he believes that the limit is deadly. Spoiler alert, it isn't. Homo perfectionis paralysatus confuses preparation with progress. He takes courses, he researches methods, he consumes content, he plans ideal versions, and he feels a false sense of movement, a behavior similar to that of an animal running on a treadmill thinking it is migrating. The fear of making mistakes also develops elegant disguises, perfectionism, excessive self-criticism, unrealistic standards. Classic phrases like, "It's not good enough yet. I need to improve a little more when I'm ready." Ready for what? For a life without risk. That doesn't exist. The soundtrack becomes denser. At this stage, the narrator says, the individual begins to avoid not only mistakes, but exposure. He avoids speaking. He avoids trying. He avoids taking a stand. He avoids starting, because starting implies the possibility of making a mistake. And making a mistake, for him, is almost a moral sentence. Observe his social behavior. He prefers not to stand out, not to commit, not to expose himself. He lives in a safe zone where nothing goes wrong and nothing extraordinary happens. A comfortable, predictable, and slowly suffocating environment. The narrator lowers his tone, almost out of respect for the silent tragedy. The cost of this behavior doesn't appear immediately. It manifests as vague frustration, a feeling of stagnation, envy disguised as criticism, an emptiness difficult to name. After all, how can one feel pride in something that has never been attempted? At some point in life, usually in a quiet and awkward moment, Homo perfectionist paralysis realizes something disturbing. He is not disappointed by his mistakes. He is disappointed by his lack of attempts. The failures that hurt the most are the ones that never existed. This is the turning point in the narrative. Dangerous moment. Because now a question arises that doesn't accept elegant answers. What if the problem isn't making mistakes? What if it's avoiding them? This question threatens the entire protection system built up over the years. The brain panics. It presents sophisticated arguments. Now is not the time. The scenario isn't ideal. You can prepare more. All to keep the individual exactly where they are. Because the known hurts less than the unknown, at least in the short term. But some individuals, rare, very rare, do something unexpected. They make a mistake on purpose. Small, controlled. A test, an imperfect attempt, a move without guarantee, and something absolutely shocking happens. Nothing. The world doesn't end. People don't run away. Identity doesn't dissolve. Mistakes happen, and life goes on. The narrator holds the tension. At this moment, a pattern breaks. The individual discovers that error is not a predator. It is a grumpy but efficient teacher. This discovery changes everything, because fear loses its main weapon. Fantasy. Error ceases to be an invisible monster and becomes an observable fact. Something that can be analyzed, adjusted, corrected. Of course, fear doesn't disappear. It never disappears. But now, it no longer rules. It protests. It complains. It makes noise. And even so, the individual acts, not because they feel confident, but because they understand that confidence comes later. The narrator explains with surgical precision. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the conscious decision not to obey it. A trainable skill. Repeatable. Cumulative. The suspense grows as the individual begins to act more, makes more mistakes, learns more, adjusts more, and something curious happens. He begins to feel alive, not comfortable. Alive. There is a difference. Comfort anesthetizes life, provokes. The climax approaches when he understands something profoundly liberating. Making mistakes doesn't diminish who you are. Avoiding them does, because it prevents growth, experience, and true identity. Those who don't make mistakes remain a promise. Those who make mistakes become someone. At this point, Homo perfectionist paralysis begins to disappear. In its place emerges an imperfect individual in motion, under construction. He doesn't feel ready, he acts anyway. He doesn't feel secure, he acts anyway. And this completely changes his trajectory. The camera slows down. The narrator concludes with that perfect blend of gravity and irony. In nature, those who avoid all risk die of starvation. In human life, those who avoid all error die of potential. Error is not the enemy. Immobility is. And now, the final question echoes like an unsettling whisper. Where are you standing? Trying to appear flawless. What step are you not taking for fear of seeming incapable? Write it in the comments. Naming the fear diminishes its size. If this documentary disguised as a reflection made you laugh, recognize yourself, and feel a little uneasy, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who is waiting for the perfect version of themselves to begin. Because that version isn't born ready-made. It's born trying, failing, and moving forward anyway.